Welcome back to True Ghost Vault, where silence is never empty, where every school hallway echoes with secrets, where the things we forget remember us. Tonight you'll hear another true horror, unearthed from the places no one dares to look. Locked janitor closets, hallways that weren't there yesterday, classrooms frozen in time. This isn't a campfire tale. This is a memory that bites back. So close the door, turn off the lights, and listen carefully. Because when it starts calling your name, it's already too late. Story 1. The Final Bell. I first heard it on a moonless night, the shrill refrain of a school bell echoing through vacant corridors, 3:40-some in the morning, though the school's moth-eaten clock insisted it was 3:15. The sound was impossible. The building had been closed for years. Doors chained, windows boarded. Yet there it was, dragging itself across tiled floors, a sound both distant and intimate, like a promise delivered in the ear of someone long forgotten. There was no annunciation, no vibrato in the intercom, just one solitary clang, suspended between emptiness and madness, repeating again and again. I felt it vibrate in my bones, each strike carving hollows into my chest. I was alone, in the parking lot, city lights behind me, darkness ahead. But I was not alone with that bell. With each toll, the air seemed to coil, tighter, cold fingers wrapping my throat, whispering something I couldn't yet understand. It began earlier that evening, my own fault curiosity, lethal in its quiet way. I'd trespassed convinced I could prove to myself the urban myth that those who heard the bell were never seen again. I shouldn't have believed it. Now it clanged without mercy, and I waited for it to stop. But when it did, when at last it paused, I realized that the silence was worse. The silence trembled. I heard footsteps in the hallway behind the black glass of the entrance doors, and then muffled voices, low and urgent, as if arguing over whether I belonged. I pressed my palm flat against the glass, peering into the darkness of the school's atrium. The lights were off. Everything was mute. But for those muted footsteps, pacing behind walls I couldn't see. My breath caught. I thought I saw movement, the flicker of a silhouette passing under a stairwell, vanishing before it reached the floor. I pulled away. I had no reason to stay, no duty, no mission, except the bell lingered, stubborn as a heartbeat, and something about that relentless chime made me feel seen by something ancient, something patient enough to wait decades for my arrival. Inside, the front doors resisted. The lock gave with a click, as if welcoming me. Inside was gloom, a long central hall under a vaulted ceiling, the floor polished but dusty. Lockers lined both sides, their vents like tiny mouths breathing cold air. I could make out the shadow of a clock, equally frozen, at 3:15 on the wall. Faded letters above the doors spelled the school's name, Millfield Secondary. There was no welcome desk, no nostalgia, just the dull thump of my shoes, soft against floor tiles, and stronger in my ears. I wanted to leave. My body fought me, but the halls called, the magnetism of silence, the demand to know. I swallowed a scream, and somewhere behind me the bell struck again. It must have struck. I felt the resonance. I turned down a side corridor. Locker doors clicked open spontaneously, hinges squealing like fingernails on chalkboard. Papers rustled inside trunks of locker space. Old shooting schedules, cafeteria menus, folded yellow hall passes, stamped 1954. I read names on stenciled labels: Anna Carlisle, Jeremy Bates, Ruth Keller. Students long graduated, many dead, but here they lingered, stickered into the doors as if they'd never left. At the corridor's end was a staircase, descending into darkness, footprints, pressed into the dust, recent prints. My heart hammering, I traced them downward. The stairwell smell was dank, a mix of mold and something coppery. Flickering fluorescent tubes buzzed to life as I stepped, casting shards of light onto falling dust motes. At the bottom, the bell sound was louder, somehow powered by proximity and dread. The hallway led to old classrooms, room numbers peeling off. I passed 13B, 14A Lab 6, but one door remained unnumbered, blank metal, the paint scarred. On it carved roughly, "Do not chime." I paused fingertip, brushing the words, "Cold." I heard shifting behind the door, a thumping cadence like an internal heartbeat. I pushed. The door swung open softly, despite its aged hinges. The room was empty, just rows of desks, coated in a century of dust. But the bell rang again, inside louder, impossible to locate. It didn't hang above. There was no mechanism. The sound echoed off the walls, minimal and yet omnipresent. Then I saw it at the front. A single desk sat upright, lamp blinking with the spectral green glow. Nothing else glowed. The desk was set with old textbooks open to pages yellowed with age. On top lay a slip of paper, handwriting faint and spidery. "You should not have come." The bell tolled again. I stumbled backward, heart screaming. I stumbled out of the room into halls that seemed altered, longer, darker, the low ceiling pressing down. The air thickened, coating my tongue with dust, filling my lungs with static. I hurried, but the corridors twisted unnaturally. Doorways shifted places. Windows looked inward rather than outside. Somewhere in the twisting architecture, I passed by posters, a homecoming dance featuring 1959, a spelling bee, whose trophy hovered in dust mold, splitting the border, and always the bell slow, rhythmic, alive. I felt it was not calling me, it was gathering me. I heard whispers in the tile crevices, barely audible murmurs of "Don't let it ring. Don't let it ring," voices layered, overlapping, growing desperate. I didn't know if they were real or my own mind fracturing. At a junction, I glanced at a door marked "Exit." Relief. I ran for it, reaching out for the bar handle, but when I touched it, burned cold, and the words vanished. In their place was "Enter." I recoiled, clawing back. The hallway contours changed again. The gargoyle above the entrance lobby coiled, downward, stone wings folding as if alive. The bell struck again, and with it a scream, not mine, a scream that echoed from inside my skull. My legs carried me forward until I reached another door, this one unmarked, heavy steel. My hand trembled as I turned the latch. Inside was a small, empty room. No windows, just the bell. On the far wall, someone had spray-painted "Time ends with the final bell." The voiceover in my head repeated it, a chant building dread. Time ends. Final bell. The bell struck one more time, and the door slammed shut behind me. The room darkened, swallowing the faint exit sign overhead. Silence. Then a slow metallic chuckle, deep and guttural, resonating from unseen walls. The air convulsed. I felt its breath on my neck. Something pressed close. I dared not move. My nails dug into the cold concrete floor. My pulse roared. The bell had stopped, and that was worse. A whisper, tick, tock. Your time is up. Then something brushed past my arm. I tasted iron. My vision tightened. Darkness. I don't know how long I was gone. When I opened my eyes, the light was different, thinner, tinged green, like algae, blooming under ice. The room hadn't changed, but the temperature had dropped. My breath puffed out in clouds, curling around me like ghosts waiting for permission to speak. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. My hands trembled with cold, but not just that. Something had touched me in the dark, something soft and damp and watching. The door was ajar. I don't remember hearing it open. But beyond it, the school was not the same. The floors shimmered slightly, like water beneath the skin of grime. Lockers that had once stood silent were now breathing softly, opening an inch, closing again, metal lips murmuring names in languages I couldn't understand. Light bulbs dangled low, flickering like fireflies caught in jars. The world smelled of mildew and ash and something else. Old chalk mixed with rot. A sound followed me, not the bell this time, but chalk dragging itself across blackboard after blackboard. I passed by classrooms where desks were no longer desks, but wooden teeth angled upward, ready to bite. In one room, the teacher's chair sat in front of a body. No face, just skin, where eyes should be. It turned to me, stood slowly, and whispered, "Are you ready to begin?" I ran. The hallway curved again. No end in sight. Every door I passed showed some memory. I'd never lived myself younger, raising my hand in a class that didn't exist. Me sitting in detention, while a figure I couldn't name stared at me from across the room with bleeding eyes. When I reached the library, I didn't mean to stop, but the door swung open for me. Inside, every shelf leaned at wrong angles, buckling under the weight of thick, fleshy books bound in human-like parchment. I stepped closer. Each spine was marked with a name. I recognized names of classmates who had died, vanished, or never really existed. My own name glowed at the end of the aisle, etched in black on a book that pulsed slightly as if with breath. I touched it. A jolt ran through me. I saw myself older speaking words I couldn't control bound to a desk as invisible hands forced me to repeat the same line over and over. It tolls for me. It tolls for me. It tolls for me. A deafening bell shattered the vision, the sound warping my senses. It wasn't just loud. It entered me, pulling sinew from thought, dragging memories out like wet threads. I screamed and dropped the book. The shelves responded. Dozens of them shook violently, coughing dust, expelling pages into the air like locusts. And behind me something opened its mouth wide and inhaled, not air, but time. I felt it stretch, fracture. My fingernails grew, then retracted. My teeth ached like I'd aged years in seconds. I fled. I found myself back at the stairwell, though it spiraled up now endlessly. I climbed. My legs burned. My chest heaved. The higher I went, the louder the ticking became. Not clocks' hearts, hundreds of them. Stuck in walls, buried in stair railings, sewn into portraits of former principals with eyeless faces and stitched mouths, all beating to the same rhythm. At the landing, a figure waited, a girl, pale with wet braids and hollow cheeks. She looked 12, maybe, but her voice was old, ancient, fractured like worn vinyl. She said only, "The bell is not for time, it's for memory." Then she was gone. Behind her, the final door. Carved into the wood, the bell tower. "Do not disturb." But it was already open. Inside, moonlight spilled from stained glass. The tower was impossibly tall, reaching far beyond the building's real height. Ropes hung limp from a bell that had no clapper, suspended in the dark like a guillotine. The bell glistened wet with something black. Below it, hundreds of desks formed a spiral, each occupied. Slumped figures, unmoving. Students in uniforms from every era, 1940s to now. All pale, with sealed eyes. One of them twitched, then another, then they began to rise. Their jaws unhinged. The bell began to ring. Not by mechanism, but by name. Each toll was the scream of a life remembered too late. And the next one would be mine. I didn't run this time. I couldn't. Their eyes were open now, every single one of them, lifeless, milky, and wide, like corpses pulled from a freezing river. They stared through me, not at me, as if I wasn't the intruder, but the final piece they'd been waiting for. One by one, the students turned their heads toward the bell. The sound wasn't metal. It was voices. Hundreds of voices screaming in unison, bending into a single low-frequency chime. It vibrated through the soles of my feet, rising up my spine, crawling into my skull. I staggered forward. The spiral of desks seemed to narrow around me. The floor dipped inward. This wasn't a room anymore. It was a throat swallowing. The girl with the braids appeared again, standing beside the base of the great bell. Her eyes were closed now. Her voice was soft, like she was reciting scripture buried in dust. Every time it rings, one is taken. But tonight is the final bell. Tonight, they all come back. I tried to speak to ask who they were, but my voice didn't exist anymore. My mouth moved, but no sound emerged, only breath and blood. The students moved in unison. Chairs creaked, hands lifted as if in prayer. And then they began to chant, voices layered and dissonant, scraping against one another like rusted blades. 3:15. 3:15. He who hears must never leave. They chanted, and the bell swelled with heat, not warmth, burning. The air thickened with the scent of scorched wood, burnt hair, and ozone. My skin prickled. The room trembled. I turned to flee, but the door had vanished. The spiral had closed behind me. Then they stopped. All at once, silence. A pulse moved through the tower like breath, but reversed. The bell inhaled, and the tower began to sink. Walls crumbled outward. The stained glass windows shattered, not into shards, but into hands, grasping writhing limbs of light that reached inward. The floor split, revealing depths that should not exist. Desks tumbled downward, student bodies with them, but they did not scream. They fell silently, endlessly swallowed by the void beneath. Only I remained, and the bell, and the girl. She looked at me, eyes wide, mouth trembling. "You were supposed to be the last," she said. "But you're not the final. You're the first." The rope dropped. I saw my hand reach for it, not by will, by invitation. It wrapped around my fingers like a vine, warm and sticky, pulsing, faintly. I tried to let go. I couldn't. The students below reached upward, mouths gaping, as if inhaling the moment. Time fractured. The girl stepped back. "Ring it and we're all free." But I understood finally. She didn't mean them. She meant what was underneath, what had been bound by time, by memory, by repetition. And I was the release valve. I screamed as I yanked the rope. The bell exploded in sound, not heard, but remembered. A chime that tore open the ribs of reality, that rang in every ear of every sleeping thing. All light vanished, and then I was in a classroom. Sunlight filtered through dusty blinds. Children sat quietly staring ahead. A teacher stood at the front, her face covered by a porcelain mask. My body was stiff. I looked down, my hands small, familiar. There was a name tag on my desk. My name. A bell rang. Not a final bell, the first bell. And I knew I would never leave this place. Time had looped, memory had rooted, and the school would toll forever until another soul heard it too. The room feels quieter now, too quiet. The air hums with something beneath, hearing like pressure, before a storm like breath behind a mirror. The other students don't move. They haven't moved for hours, or maybe days, or maybe I've just stopped measuring time. The teacher with the porcelain mask paces softly. Her footsteps make no sound. Chalk moves across the blackboard on its own, writing the same sentence again and again. The bell must toll. The bell must toll. The bell must toll. I try not to read it anymore. I try not to blink too long or look too closely at the others. Some have faces, some don't. Some whisper prayers under their breath. Some stare into space with eyes that flicker like candle flames in a windless room. Sometimes I remember things I never lived. A girl screaming in the tower, a boy folding into darkness, a library of names that never belonged to real people. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the rope tightening. And sometimes, just sometimes, I feel the urge to ring the bell again. But that's the trap, isn't it? That's the trick that keeps the wheel turning. Because this school, this thing, it isn't haunted in the way we understand. It's not a place. It's a pattern, a memory engine. It takes what you fear most and binds it to what you love. It erases the difference between now and then, between you and them. And when the bell tolls, it doesn't summon spirits. It rewrites reality. I am not a ghost. I am not alive. I am a page one of many in a story that keeps writing itself. And somewhere out there, someone else is hearing the bell for the first time. They're leaning forward. They're curious. They're opening the gate. And when they step through, I will be waiting. We all will. Forever. Story 2, The Unlocked Lab. They told us not to go near it. The teachers, the janitor, the seniors who'd been around long enough to know how to keep their heads down. Even the blueprint stapled in the guidance office had it blacked out a thick, violent scribble across the bottom left wing of Building C. Lab 6 didn't exist. But I remember it. I remember the door. I remember how it breathed. I was 17 the first time I heard it. A subtle noise at the end of the corridor, like wires humming, like machines warming up behind concrete that shouldn't have held anything alive. The science wing had been under construction that semester. Old asbestos tiles pulled up water damage in the walls. They'd rerouted classes. No one went near Lab 6 because officially Lab 6 had been decommissioned since 1991. But sometimes late in the day, you could hear something from behind it. Something moving. Not footsteps. Not quite. More like shuffling, wet dragging, clicking like bone on metal. I thought it was a joke. I thought maybe someone was playing into the old legend, the one about the accident, the fire, the missing students. The phrase they whispered in freshman year, "Don't follow the static." But I didn't believe in ghost stories back then. I believed in physics, in controlled variables. I believed that things didn't happen without cause. So when I heard the noise again, louder, sharper echoing, like a cough from something deep-throated and unseen, I followed it. It was late, dusk bleeding through the long windows of Building C. Everyone else had gone home. I told myself I was just curious, that I wasn't really going in. But the door to Lab 6, it wasn't locked. It never had been. The handle was cold. Not cold like metal in winter. Cold like it didn't want to be touched. Cold like it pulled something from me when I gripped it. A memory maybe, or a name I used to wear. I opened it, and time hiccuped. The hallway lights blinked. My vision stuttered. The sound of fluorescent buzzing reversed, spiraled inward, then stopped. I stepped inside. At first it was just a room, a normal lab, if outdated counters covered in dust, cracked sinks, old pipettes, and broken Erlenmeyer flasks. The smell of ammonia and something spoiled, cabinets bolted shut, floor tiles stained with rust that didn't look like rust. There were names scratched into the tables, some I recognized, some that hadn't been enrolled in decades. Then I saw the back wall. The far end of the lab wasn't solid. It moved, the paint rippled slow and fluid, like the surface of water under glass. A distortion, like heat waves, but colder. My breath smoked. I took a step forward, And that's when I heard it. A voice, but not aloud. It spoke behind my thoughts, inside a part of my mind that had no language. We are still here. My legs refused to move. The ripple in the wall stretched, warping into a circle. No, not a circle. An opening, like an eye peeled wide, lidless. Beyond it, a corridor pulsing, half-lit, carved into geometry that didn't obey any natural angle. It was deeper than the building should go. Far deeper. I should have turned back. I knew that. Every inch of my body knew that. But the door behind me was gone. Just more hallway, just more ripple. Something had shifted. Time, space, me, I couldn't tell, but nothing was in the right place anymore. The lab was still there, but it was older, decayed, or maybe it had always looked like this, and I'd just forgotten how to see it. The voice again. This time, it had weight. They let us in. They let us through. They closed the door before we finished leaving. The ripple flashed. For a split second, I saw something in it. A figure long-limbed, crouched low, flesh folded wrong. It didn't have a face. It had places where faces used to be, and it was looking straight at me. I ran, back through the lab, through the hallway that should have led to the stairs. But the hallway looped. It brought me back to the lab, back to the ripple. Only this time the figure wasn't inside it. It was behind me, breathing. I didn't turn around. Something primal in me screamed not to. Not because I didn't want to see it, but because it wanted me to. I felt its breath, warm and wet, close enough to fog the nape of my neck. I could hear it trying to mimic a sound, a shape, a voice. Mine. It whispered in the exact rhythm of my last spoken thought. You shouldn't be here. I bolted, but the lab had no corners now. No fixed angles. The exit I thought I came from was now a sloping wall, folding inward like a decayed lung. My footsteps didn't echo anymore. They just dampened, absorbed by the floor, which rippled under each step like skin, reacting to a needle. I found a door. New. Metal. Stamped with faded yellow text. Storage. Sublevel. That door should not have been there. It shouldn't have opened by itself. But it did. Metal grinding. Deep dragging. Like something long buried being pried open. The staircase behind it descended at an impossible angle. It spiraled down far longer than the building's height. The walls were concrete, scratched, dented, scribbled over with equations and drawings and claw marks. They weren't random. They were aligned. Markings layered with intention, as if someone or something had been trapped here and left a message, one scratch at a time. I should have stopped. I should have screamed. But curiosity is a curse. And some part of me, the part no longer entirely mine, wanted to remember. The staircase ended abruptly. Not at a floor, at a mirror. Not glass, not metal, but surface. Black, wet, pulsing. I saw myself reflected. Then I saw my reflection blink out of sync. It smiled. I didn't. It lifted its hand palm outward and pressed it against the mirror. I didn't move, but I felt its touch, cold and tingling, like a dead limb waking up. The reflection whispered something, not in my voice, in the voice of my mother. Come home. The mirror collapsed inward like a punctured lung. A scream poured out, not from one mouth, from many. A scream of everyone who'd ever entered this place and never left. I fell forward, and suddenly I wasn't in the lab anymore. I was in a hallway, old and long lockers, rotted through flickering red lights, casting every shadow twice. I could hear the bell, not a school bell, a warning, a countdown, ringing once, then twice, then louder. At the end of the hallway was a classroom door, its window covered in dried blood. I approached. Inside, silhouettes sat at desks. Students, all unmoving, but their faces were smeared with something like oil and tar features melted. One of them turned toward me, its head cracking sideways like a stick breaking. It was my face, and it said, "We never left. We never died. We just remembered too late." The door slammed. I backed away, but I didn't get far. The hallway twisted, became smaller. The lockers began to open, slowly. One by one, hinges screeching like metal, confessing sin. And from inside them, arms unfolded, fingers too long, skin like paper, soaked in black ink. The lockers were full of them, the missing, the ones who followed the static. I screamed. I ran, but every turn brought me back to Lab 6. Every route folded into it. The ripple was larger now. The voice was clearer, and it didn't ask anymore. It commanded. Step through. I stepped through, not because I wanted to, because I had to. Because something inside me, older than thought, buried beneath the bones of instinct, recognized this place. It wasn't unfamiliar. It was home, the kind of home that sleeps under your skin, that waits to bloom when the last light dies. The ripple passed over me like water, no like flesh. I emerged into a space that defied dimension. The walls pulsed like lungs exhaling rot. Floors curved upward like a cage. No corners, no sky, just layers of wrong. Every surface shimmered with movement, things slithering just beneath the film of reality. This was the core of Lab 6. Not a lab at all. A wound, an old one. A place where time had been peeled open and something crawled out but never left. In the center, a sphere hovered, 6 feet wide, blacker than anything I'd ever seen. A perfect absence. My mind refused to wrap around it. Every time I stared, I forgot what I was doing. My hands trembled, my vision blurred. The world around me stuttered like a corrupted video file. And then the whispers began, all around me, inside me, voices speaking in fragments of memory. You sat in this desk before. You opened the door. You forgot who you were. The sound of pencils scratching paper, pages turning, breathing, so much breathing. I looked down. Desks surrounded the sphere, hundreds of them, each occupied. Children, teenagers, adults, eyes open, silent. Some grinning with the mouths sewn shut, some with no faces at all staring at the void. One of them looked like me, not kind of like me, exactly like me. Same clothes, same bruise on the knuckle, same fear behind the eyes. He turned his head slow and cracking. He opened his mouth and said my name, my real name. A name I hadn't heard in years. The bell rang. Not a sound. A snap like something tearing in two. Reality split. I saw flashes, my body in bed dreaming. My body in a hallway knocking on a locked door. My body inside a locker, eyes wide, mouth frozen in a silent scream, and the sphere pulsed. A heartbeat, a command, feed me. One of the students stood, walked forward, entered the sphere, didn't scream, just disappeared. Gone. Erased. Another followed, then another. One by one they offered themselves, as if it was all they ever knew how to do. And behind them, behind me, the figure returned, the long-limbed thing from the ripple. No face, just folds, just mouths, stitched shut and leaking. It touched my shoulder, cold, soft, and in its voice, all voices it asked, "Will you remember now?" I broke. I screamed so hard my throat tore open, but no sound came out, only memory. My first day of school, the door I wasn't supposed to open, the boy who disappeared in '91, the bell, always the bell. My mind cracked open. Memories that weren't mine poured in like sewage under pressure. I saw through their eyes the students who came before me, who sat in those desks, who looked into that black sphere and forgot how to speak. They had names once, families, futures. Now they were shadows of possibility, echoes fed to the void. I wasn't different. I was just next. I tried to run. The floor liquefied beneath me, becoming a thick membrane that clung to my legs with every step. Each movement sent tremors through the chamber. Faces bubbled from the walls, smiling, screaming, repeating the same question over and over. Do you remember now? A voice, mine but not mine, screaming backward, as if my soul had been recorded on tape and was now being rewound. I made it to the edge of the room, clawing at a door that wasn't there. My nails snapped against the wall, my skin split. Behind me, the sphere began to spin. Not fast, just enough. Its surface peeled like old paint, revealing layers beneath. Teeth wires, broken, clocks, bleeding gears, snapshots of classrooms that didn't exist. Inside it, I saw myself 100 different ways. A janitor sweeping an empty hallway, a teacher taking attendance with no students present, a boy alone in a locker whispering 315, 315. It showed me every version I could have been, every outcome except escape. Then came the whisper again, not in my ear, in my bones. Time is a body, memory is the knife. I turned. The figure stood between me and the sphere, but it wasn't monstrous anymore. It wore my face. Its eyes were hollow sockets filled with ink. Its smile was genuine. I wanted to kill it. I wanted to become it. It stepped forward and offered me a piece of chalk. Simple, white, unbroken, and behind it the blackboard stretched wide across the void wall. Nothing written yet. Blank, waiting. The figure leaned in. Its voice was calm. Write it down. What happened? Or it'll happen again. Worse. I hesitated, then I stepped forward. I took the chalk. My hand moved on its own. Words poured out of me. Names, locations, dates, details I'd never known. Warnings, schematics. Rituals disguised as safety drills. Every stroke of chalk felt like cutting open a sealed wound. I cried, I bled, but I didn't stop. The sphere screamed, a roar that wasn't air, or pain, or rage, but the sound of forgetting, fighting to live. The walls collapsed inward, the students vanished, the floor caved, and I fell. Not physically, just out. I woke up in my bed, at home. Afternoon light filtered through my window, phone buzzing. I was back, alive, alone, but not whole. I walked to the bathroom mirror. My face looked the same. My eyes did not. On my palm, a line of chalk dust, still warm. I should have moved on. I should have burned my notes, erased the drawings, forgotten the sound of the sphere, but I didn't. I wrote it down, all of it, and now, you're reading it. You've heard the static too, haven't you? You felt something behind the door you were never meant to open. It's already begun. You just haven't remembered yet. It's quiet now. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles behind your thoughts, where you can't scrub it clean. My days are normal. I get up. I shower. I drink coffee that tastes like ash and forgetfulness. But every night just before sleep, I hear it again. That hum, that soft, pulsing static, coming from behind the closet door, from the back of the hallway mirror, from inside my chest. Lab 6 never let go of me, because it was never a place. It's a system, a ritual, a memory virus designed to plant itself in the soft tissue of the curious. And now that you've heard it, now that you've read this, it's already mapped your way in. You'll start dreaming of old schools, of stairwells that stretch too far, of classrooms full of students you don't recognize but almost do. You'll hear the bell at 3:15, once, then again, and you'll think it's your imagination. but it's not. It's the door creaking open. It's the ripple forming. It's the void remembering you. Because that's how it survives. It doesn't consume. It collects. Time folds around it. Identity breaks against it. And memory is the debt it collects. You don't have to believe me. You will. Soon. When the chalk appears on your desk. When the power flickers at the edge of thought. When you wake up one night and your reflection doesn't follow. By then it's too late. You'll go looking. You'll find the door. You'll step through, and when the void asks your name, you'll give it, and the ripple will close behind you. Story 3. The hallway between periods. There's a hallway in my school that doesn't always exist. I don't mean that metaphorically. It's not some architectural fluke or forgotten service corridor tucked between the wings. It doesn't appear on the map. The janitors don't clean it. There are no exit signs, no fire alarms, no intercom speakers. No one ever talks about it, not even the teachers who should know every inch of the place. But I know it because I've walked it, and I don't think I ever left. It usually appears between third and fourth period, that strange lull when the bell rings and students pour out like released pressure. I'm always the last to leave class, not on purpose, just distracted. I move slower than the others. Maybe that's why it chose me. The day it happened, I remember my stomach hurt. Not badly, just a twisting unease. I stayed behind after third period to ask a question, a stupid one I can't even remember now. When I stepped into the hallway, it was already nearly empty. Only a few students rushing to class, backpacks bouncing, shoes squeaking on linoleum. Then I blinked, and the hallway was silent. No students, no sound. The lights above flickered. That's when I saw it. The hallway to the left one I didn't recognize. Just past the water fountain and the trophy case with the cracked glass. It was narrow, unlit. I should have known better. I should have turned right, gone straight to chemistry, pretended I never saw it. But I didn't. I stepped in, and the bell rang again, but it was wrong, off-key, slower, like it had traveled through something thick and wet. Before reaching my ears, the air changed, heavier. My footsteps no longer echoed, they sank. The floor tiles looked the same, but the walls had warped. Lockers stretched, taller, thinner, the vents curled inward like gills. Every few feet the lights above buzzed, but only one remained on at a time, as if the hallway couldn't afford more than that. I told myself it was a maintenance wing. I told myself I could still turn around. I tried, but the entrance was gone. Just blank wall. And then I heard it. A clicking sound behind me. Not loud, but deliberate. Like something walking, not on shoes but on bone. I turned, heart hammering. Nothing there. Only lockers, closed. Silent. I walked faster. I passed a door on the left. No room number, just a long horizontal slit like an observation window. I peeked inside, a classroom. Empty desks. Chalkboard scrawled with red symbols that looked wet. The smell was the worst part. Like mold and vinegar. And something else forgotten. The hallway kept turning. I didn't remember taking corners, but it twisted anyway, deeper and deeper until the ceiling lowered. The lockers were gone now. Just walls breathing slowly. Every few steps I passed things I shouldn't have, a paper on the floor with my name written over and over. A textbook open to a page that hadn't been printed yet. A mirror that didn't show my face. Then footsteps, not mine. Close. Following. The slow drag of something barefoot and damp. I ran without thinking, without breathing, because if I slowed even once, I knew it would catch me. I didn't know what it was. I still don't, but it knew me. The hallway changed again. The floor dipped slightly. I began walking downward, though I was certain I hadn't gone underground. The walls were darker, here not painted, but stained, like something seeped through from the other side. Handprints long and smudged, smears that pulsed faintly. At the end of the corridor, a door, wooden, not a school door, older, carved. My name was etched into the frame. I touched it, warm. It opened without sound. Inside a room full of desks, and every seat was filled with someone who looked like me. Inside a room full of desks, and every seat was filled with someone who looked like me. Not a resemblance, not doppelgangers. Me, exactly. Down to the smallest scar, the freckle under my eye, the crease in my collar from the way I fold laundry. Dozens of versions of myself, each frozen mid-movement. One with his head down, one staring into nothing, one chewing the inside of his cheek, like he knew something was about to go wrong. They didn't notice me at first. I stood in the doorway, breath shallow, blood humming in my ears. The lights in the ceiling buzzed faintly, though it was less like electricity and more like insects behind the walls. One of them moved, just a twitch, a subtle adjustment of posture. But then another did the same, and then a third. Their heads began to turn not in sync, but like falling dominoes, a slow cascade of attention tilting toward me, until every single one of them was staring. I stepped back. The door behind me was gone. Of course it was. The one nearest me, the one who had moved first, stood up. I watched myself rise. It felt like watching a home video I didn't remember filming. He blinked. His eyes were darker than mine, not in color, in weight, like they'd seen something I hadn't yet. He walked toward me. I froze. He stopped a few feet away. We were the same height. His shirt had the same stain on the sleeve mine did. His lips curled into a slow smile. Not warm, not cruel, just inevitable. "You came back," he said. His voice was mine, but hollow, dried out, worn thin from use. "I never left," he added. The others stood, one by one, quietly. Desks scraped against the floor, a sound too smooth, too practiced. I turned looking for anything, a window, an exit, a vent, a break in the pattern. There was nothing but desks, and me, and them. "You don't remember it yet," the other me whispered, "but you've been here before." He raised a hand, my hand, held it palm up. "Sit," he said. The nearest desk to me was empty now. The seat pulled out slightly. Waiting, I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to believe this was some psychotic dream, that I'd fallen asleep in math class and was moments from waking up to the smell of whiteboard marker and burnt coffee from the teacher's mug. But I couldn't move, because deep down I knew something worse. This wasn't the first time I'd been asked to sit. And last time I was already walking toward the desk. I sat, not by choice. My body moved like it had done this before. Muscle memory, ritual. The seat groaned under me. The others sat too, in perfect silence, in perfect symmetry. 100 identical gazes turned forward, eyes locked on the blackboard that hadn't existed a moment ago. Now it did. It took up the entire front wall. Blacker than it should have been, not the matte black of chalk paint, but something absorbing. It pulled light in, and at its center something was written. "Do you remember now?" The words weren't chalk, they weren't carved, they were moving, like veins pulsing just beneath the surface. I looked at my hands. They were wrong, too clean. No callus from my pen, no scar on the middle knuckle where I'd cracked it years ago during a fight I don't talk about. I looked up. Every version of me was smiling, except me. The air shifted, grew still. A hum pressed into the edges of my hearing, the way silence feels after a gunshot. Then one of them stood. He walked to the front of the room, picked up a piece of chalk, and began to write. Not words, symbols, Shapes I didn't recognize, but knew. They curved wrong, bent into themselves. My stomach turned with each stroke. A headache bloomed behind my eyes, not from pain, but from memory pushing back. I had drawn these long ago, before I left, before they found me. The other me, the one who'd spoken first, leaned across his desk. His breath smelled like something old and forgotten in an attic. "You remember now," he said. I shook my head. He smiled again. "Patient. You remember because you're not new." He gestured to the chalkboard. "You're the one who drew the door open." My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. "You left once. You made it out, but you didn't close it." The chalk snapped in the hand of the version at the board. The room groaned. The walls bled thin black lines, leaking down from the ceiling like veins finally breaking open. "You left a crack," he said, "and cracks are doors." I stood, or thought I did, but the room was no longer a room. It was a corridor again, twisting, stretching. All of us, the reflections, the copies, the fragments were walking now. Single file, silent, no sound of steps, only the bell, not ringing, dragging, being pulled across the floor. Behind us, closer, closer. I turned to see what followed. I shouldn't have. It didn't have a face. It had all of ours, stacked, layered, melted into one another. It didn't walk. It remembered forward. That's what the hallway was, not a trap, a recording, a punishment for trying to forget what we were never meant to know. And I was the one who started it. We kept walking. There was no end, just turn after turn the floor, dipping more sharply each time, the air thickening, each breath heavier than the last. The others didn't seem to feel it. They didn't sweat. They didn't blink. They didn't age. But I did. I felt my spine ache, my lips cracked, my shoes' softened soles breaking open like fruit, gone too ripe. The corridor widened ahead. A glow pulsed from the walls, not light, but something deeper, like memory under skin. We entered a chamber, circular, huge, a pit in the center. Inside it, the crack. It wasn't large, a fracture running down the far wall, jagged and pulsing slightly. Something pushed behind it like pressure against glass, and it was breathing, or pretending to. The others circled the pit. All of us, the 100 versions, the infinite selves, sat again, forming a perfect ring. I remained standing. I couldn't look away from the crack. It remembered me, not in concept, by name, by blood. And as I stared, I finally saw what I hadn't before, a faint line of chalk tracing its edge, a mark I'd made once long ago. The line was broken now, eroded, incomplete. I had opened it, and I had never closed it. The version of me who had first spoken stepped forward again. He held something in his hand, a new piece of chalk, white, pristine. He offered it. "You're the original," he said. Not accusing, not cruel, just fact. You brought the hallway into this world. You named it. You gave it form. I shook my head, but he continued. You walked it too many times. You remembered too much. Now it's stuck open. I stared at the chalk. The others chanted, voices flat. Close it, close it, close it. But I knew what closing it meant. It wasn't sealing a door. It was sacrificing a self. The hallway demands equivalence. A memory for a memory. A name for a name. It needs someone to become the lock. That's what they all were. Every version of me I'd left behind. Every time I escaped and forgot, a fragment stayed, and now there was nothing left to give but the whole. I stepped forward, took the chalk, walked to the crack, traced the missing line. The moment the circle closed, everything stopped. The breath, the chanting, the weight of time. And in the silence, I felt it seal, but something sealed with it. Something final. I turned. The others were gone. The hallway was gone. Only the chalk remained in my hand, cracked in two. I woke up on the floor outside the trophy case. Fourth period had just begun. Everything looked normal. Students brushed past me. No one noticed. No one looked twice. But when I glanced over my shoulder, the hallway wasn't there. Only a blank stretch of lockers. Clean. Ordinary. And yet, I felt them. All of them. Still inside me. Still remembering. Still waiting. I went back to class. Sat through chemistry like nothing had happened. Took notes I couldn't read. Laughed at things I didn't understand. No one asked where I'd been, because to them I'd never left. That's how it works. The hallway doesn't steal you away. It folds you in, lets you walk again, lets you pretend. But you're not the same. You never will be. That night I dreamed of the crack again. Sealed now, but not healed. Beneath it, I felt pressure. Memory, building like steam. And in the dream, I was back in that chair. Hands folded, mouth closed, eyes wide. And someone new opened the door. I smiled, because that's what happens. You think you're alone in the hallway, but we're always watching. We're part of it now. Every version of me left behind like teeth in a forgotten mouth. And when the door opens again, when the next student lingers too long between periods, distracted, curious, vulnerable, we'll be there, waiting, smiling. Even now, if you listen closely, you might hear your footsteps echo where they shouldn't. You might see a hallway that wasn't there before. And when you do, you'll walk it, because you always have. You just never came out. Story 4. The Janitor's Keys. I found the keys in my locker. That was the first time. They were all too old to belong to any modern school. Heavy brass, dulled with time, strung together on a brittle loop of wire. The kind of keys you see in basements, in closets, sealed for decades, in buildings scheduled for demolition. They clinked when I touched them. They smelled like rust and pine cleaner. At first I thought someone left them by mistake. Some maintenance guy maybe. Except there was no janitor on shift that week. Ours Mr. Kinley had gone missing 6 days earlier. The principal said he was on sudden leave, left midday, walked off the grounds, and never came back. But the seniors told a different story. They said he was mopping in front of room 214 when he stopped halfway down the hall. Just froze. Mid-step. Mop still wet the water, soaking into the tile beneath him. They blinked, and he was gone. No sound, no shadow, just that wet streak on the floor. No one could explain it. Security cameras had been malfunctioning that afternoon. No footage, no leads, no sign of him outside. They searched the grounds, checked the woods behind the baseball field, sent emails, called hospitals. Nothing. And then 4 days later, the keys started showing up. First in lockers, then in backpacks, then in someone's hand. Like they'd always been there. I held mine at arm's length. I didn't remember picking them up. They had weight. They dragged at the edge of thought. My fingers tingled. There were 5 of them on the ring, each marked with a stamped letter, BCEX, and one with no letter at all. That last one was longer than the others. Thin curved. It didn't look like it fit any door on campus. I tried to turn them in. I walked to the front office, but the moment I placed them on the counter, they vanished. I mean that literally. The woman behind the desk blinked, and they were gone. She looked at me like I was wasting her time, told me to stop messing around, that I shouldn't joke about Kinley. I checked my pockets. They were there again. Every key, every clang. No matter where I left them, they came back. I threw them in the trash, locked them in my locker, buried them behind the bleachers. Each time they returned, until finally they appeared inside my hand. Not placed, not dropped, wrapped into my palm like they'd always been there, like I'd been born with them. I didn't scream, but something inside me did. I knew then the keys weren't meant to unlock anything ordinary. They were waiting, and they'd chosen me. I started seeing the doors 3 days later. Not new ones, not strange. Familiar ones, except they hadn't been there the day before. The first was in the east stairwell. Metal dented painted that same pale, institutional green every other door wore. But this one had no handle, just a lock, wide, circular, too deep for any modern key. I didn't try it, not then. But when I reached into my pocket later that day, just out of habit, the key with no letter was cold in my palm. Colder than the others, like it had been waiting. I stared at it for a long time, turned it over, ran my thumb along its teeth. It was slick, too smooth. And when I put it back in my pocket, the skin of my hand stung, like it had bitten me. That night I dreamed of water, dirty water, pooling in the hallway. Something was moving through it. I couldn't see what, only the shape, tall, bent at the middle, dragging something long behind it. Its reflection didn't match its body, and in its hand, the keys, my keys. I woke with a copper taste in my mouth. My phone buzzed beside the bed. No messages, just a calendar notification I hadn't set. Room B14, midnight. There is no B14 in our building. The basement only goes to B12. Storage, boiler, records. But the key, marked B, was colder than before. I didn't tell anyone. I should have. Instead, I went. The building was wrong at night. The lights were dimmer than they should have been. The walls felt narrower, like they were listening. The posters on the bulletin board had changed, faces missing from yearbook photos, a clock with no hands. I made my way to the basement. No one followed, but I was not alone. I passed B10, B11, B12, then nothing. Just a blank stretch of wall where B14 never existed. I stood there, heart loud in my ears, the key sweating in my palm. And then a sound, wet, rhythmic, like a mop sliding across the tile. Over and over, just beyond the wall, the key twitched in my grip. I held it up uncertain. The wall in front of me pulsed, and a seam appeared, thin at first, then widening. The shape of a door pressed forward, slow like something remembering how to be solid. The metal groaned. The lock formed last circular gaping, waiting. I didn't want to try the key, but I had already started turning it. The lock clicked once, then deeper, and something on the other side moved. The door opened inward. It didn't swing, it peeled, as if the wall was part of it. Layers of paint and concrete stretching thin, tearing back reluctantly. The darkness behind it wasn't black. It was wet, the kind of darkness that clings to your skin, sinks into your teeth. I stepped in. There was no sound at first, just a depth of silence so thick it made my ears ring. I smelled ammonia rot and something else, something sharp and sweet, like fruit left to die in a locked room. The floor was tiled, but warped, buckled, and sagging. Every step squelched, the grout weeping. The ceiling was low, too low. Pipes twisted through it like roots leaking. The walls were lined with cabinets, old janitorial lockers, dusty, locked, except one. It stood half open, and from inside, a slow metallic drag, like keys on concrete. I didn't want to go near it, but my legs kept moving. The closer I got, the colder the air became, not the cold of winter or open air, but a cellar, cold, old, and sour and deep. My breath steamed in front of me. I reached for the locker, and the door swung wide. Inside, nothing, just a mop, standing upright, wood dry head, soaked red. At its base, a trail of rust-colored water winding away into another hallway I hadn't seen before, narrow, arched, covered in filth. At the mouth of that hallway, a figure, bent, dragging something. Tall and gaunt spine bowed outward like a question mark. He didn't look up, but I knew him. Kinley, what was left of him. His janitor's jumpsuit was soaked sleeves torn. Skin hung loose on his frame like wet cloth. His hands dragged behind him, each one curled around a ring of keys. Dozens of them, hundreds, too many. They trailed behind him like chains. He didn't walk. He shuffled, like the floor was pulling him deeper, step by step. And he was humming. Low, broken, not a song, a pattern, a loop. I stepped back, but the hallway behind me had vanished. Just more lockers now, all sealed, all vibrating slightly. I turned back toward Kinley. He'd stopped. He was looking at me. His eyes were gone, empty sockets black and wet and unblinking. But I knew he saw me, and when he opened his mouth, dozens of keys fell out, clattering to the floor in front of him. Then he spoke. "You have mine." His voice wasn't his. It was mine, from a place I hadn't reached yet. He held out his hand and smiled. He held out his hand, that impossible hand, gray-veined fingers twisted like broken antennae. And even though every part of me begged to run, to scream, to disappear, I stepped forward because the keys were burning now, all of them. My hand trembled, the ring shaking faintly the way metal vibrates just before snapping. Each key buzzed with a different rhythm, some fast, some slow, but the one marked B was pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. I tried to pull the ring from my pocket, but it was already gone. In my other hand, raised, as if offering, as if I'd been preparing to hand them over this whole time. Kinley's hand closed around mine. He didn't flinch at the heat. His skin hissed when he touched at the metal, steaming slightly like the keys were cauterizing something unseen, and then he wept. Not like a man, not like anything alive. It sounded like glass splintering. His lips moved, slow and cracked. I locked it because I had to. You keep opening it, you keep bringing it back. The floor rippled beneath us. Something moaned, not Kinley, not me, but the building. I looked down. There was a hatch in the tile now. Square, iron, the kind used in boiler rooms and crawl spaces. At its center, the blank key, the one with no letter. It twitched. A sound echoed beneath the hatch, faint, breathy, wet. Kinley let go of my hand. He stepped back. "You have to be the last." He didn't explain. He didn't move again. He just stood there, head bowed, like a marionette that had forgotten its strings. I reached down. The blank key fit the lock without resistance. It turned itself, and the hatch opened. No air rose up, only dark. A shaft with no ladder. Walls of brick, slick with something black. And far, far below, breathing. It wasn't the breath of lungs, it was the breath of thought. Something down there was remembering me, waiting for its keys, waiting to be unlocked. I should have run, but I didn't, because in that moment I realized something else. Kinley hadn't vanished. He had descended, and now it was my turn. The key vanished from my hand as soon as the hatch opened. One moment it was there, warm, vibrating, eager. The next, just absence, like it had never existed. The hole beneath me pulsed. It didn't smell like a basement. It smelled like a mouth. I leaned forward. I couldn't see the bottom. The shaft wasn't perfectly square. It curved subtly, as if it didn't want to be seen all at once. The walls were brick at first, but deeper down, they turned to something else, something slick and fibrous, like veins carved into clay. I sat on the edge, swung my legs in, and let go. I expected to fall. I didn't. I slid downward, fast but smooth, like the shaft had molded to my shape, pulling me deeper. My fingers brushed the sides and came away damp. Every few feet I passed things embedded in the walls, a shoe, a rusted lunchbox, a cracked lanyard with a faded ID, Kinley's photo, and then mine. "You've been here before," the shaft whispered, and something inside me believed it. I didn't land. I arrived. The tunnel widened and opened into a space that didn't make sense. No ceiling, no walls, just open dark lit faintly by a sickly blue light that had no source. In the center, a janitor's cart, dusty, pristine, still holding a mop, and beside it, a door, freestanding, wood, old, rotting at the corners, soaked through. Every few seconds, the grain of the wood shifted, almost like muscle, twitching beneath skin. And nailed into the center, nearly hidden beneath the grime, was a small metal plaque. "Do not unlock." The keys were waiting on the floor. All of them. My set, Kinley's, hundreds more, all laid in a spiral pointing inward toward the door. Behind it, I heard the groan. Not loud, not threatening, just familiar. Something waiting to be recognized. And as I stepped closer, I saw shadows moving beneath the floor. Shapes, faces, some of them mine, some of them still trying to scream, and all of them holding keys. I picked up the keys. They were cold now, not just temperature memory. Each one vibrated with something unfinished. Regret sealed in brass. I could feel their weight shift in my hand, the way you feel a lie settling in your stomach. I stood in front of the door. My name was carved into the wood. Not fresh, not vandalized, etched over years, layered, rewritten, like the door had tried to forget me and failed. I reached for the handle. It turned. It had always been unlocked, but the act of turning it, that was the key. The door creaked open, and behind it, a hallway. Familiar, fluorescent lights buzzing, lockers lined along the sides, water stains on the ceiling tiles. It was the school, but wrong. Everything was slightly off. The proportions, the depth, the shadows stretched too far. The faces in the classroom portraits were smudged, names unreadable. I stepped through, and the door vanished. The moment I crossed the threshold, the keys melted in my hand, not literally but functionally. I dropped them. They didn't hit the floor. They simply weren't there anymore. The hallway turned, and there ahead of me, pushing a mop, dragging his cart, was Kinley. Whole, unbroken, smiling. "You're early," he said. His voice was kind, gentle, like he didn't remember what he'd become, like he never had. I tried to speak, but behind me the door was gone, and the mop was already leaving streaks. Wet ones, familiar. He passed room 214, paused, looked over his shoulder. "They'll come soon," he said. "You'll have the keys ready." I nodded, because I did, because I would, because I always had. Even now, if you check your bag, your locker, your hand, you might find them. Keys you don't remember picking up. Keys to doors you never noticed before. And when you turn one, you won't hear it click. You'll hear footsteps. And then a mop sliding slowly across the floor, and then nothing at all. Story 5. The Talking Skull. And it was never supposed to be there. The skull, I mean. We weren't even supposed to open the cabinet. The key had been lost for years. Mr. Henson said it was probably inside one of the filing drawers or taken home by a teacher long gone. The storage room in the back of the history class was always locked, always dim, always ignored, until the week he asked me to help clean it out. There was no warning, no shadow crawling beneath the door, no whisper in the dark, just the creak of a hinge and the sudden smell of old paper rust and mold. The cabinet was metal, beige, a dent in the corner, 3 drawers. I opened the top one. Maps, folded, torn, some dated as far back as 1943. I moved them aside, looking for anything that needed archiving. That's when I saw it, wedged at the back of the drawer, nestled between two thick atlases and a velvet pouch stained black around the edges. A human skull. Real. Too real. There was no glass case, no educational label, no tag saying replica. The bone was yellowed teeth, uneven. A small fracture above the left eye socket. I froze, breath catching. Something in my body went tight, and then it moved. Not the whole skull, just the jaw. It didn't fall open. It flexed like someone stretching after a long sleep. I slammed the drawer shut. My pulse thudded behind my eyes, but I couldn't leave because I hadn't imagined it. I knew I hadn't. My hand was still on the handle, and through the metal I could feel it. Not motion, heat. The drawer was warm now, faint, barely, but undeniable. I looked at the door to the hallway. No sound, no footsteps. I opened the drawer again. The skull was facing me now. It had turned. The lower jaw hung slightly open, and from inside that open space, that mouthless mouth, came a sound. Not a voice. Not at first. A breath. Not mine. Then slowly it spoke. "Hello," it said. I dropped the drawer. It clanged shut, and something inside the cabinet laughed. I didn't tell Mr. Henson. I couldn't. How do you explain something like that? I spent the rest of the day pretending I hadn't heard it, that my hands hadn't gone numb, that my breath hadn't hitched when it said hello, not in some cartoonish rasp, but in a voice that felt like it belonged inside me. Familiar, impossible. I didn't go back to the storage room that day, but that night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw its sockets. Not empty, not really, just deep enough to hide something watching. And in the silence of my room, I swore I heard it again. Hello. This time, quieter. Not from a drawer, from my closet. I turned on the light. Nothing there. No skull. No voice. No sign of anything except the quiet guilt that had started crawling under my skin like mildew. The next morning I went back. I told myself I had to prove it didn't happen, that I'd find a Halloween prop someone tossed in by mistake, a prank, a misplaced teaching tool from decades ago. I opened the drawer. The skull was waiting. Same place, same tilt, but something had changed. A name was carved into the bone's shallow crude, like someone used a nail. My name. I hadn't seen it there before. It hadn't been there. I stepped back, my throat dry. I reached into my bag, took out my phone. I snapped a photo, then a second. In the second photo, the skull was smiling, just barely. The mandible raised, the teeth pressed together in a mockery of expression. I blinked. When I looked again, it hadn't moved, but I knew it had, because something pressed against the inside of my thoughts, softly like a whisper. We remember. I closed the drawer, locked it even though I had no key. I walked out, but the name stayed with me. Not the one carved into the bone, the one it whispered when I turned to leave. Not my name, someone else's. A name I hadn't heard since 7th grade. A name I'd buried like a bone beneath years of silence. And that night, I dreamed of the river and the hand that never surfaced. I stayed away for 2 days, skipped Mr. Henson's class, told the nurse I was sick, wandered the halls with a note forged in panic. Every corner of the school felt warped, stretched tight around a pressure I couldn't name. The skull hadn't followed me, not physically, but I felt it, in my bag, in my thoughts, like a voice pressing against the inside of my jaw, humming something only I could hear. The third morning, the photo disappeared from my phone, not deleted, erased. I had texted it to myself for safety, a reminder that I wasn't losing my grip. The message was gone, the thread gone, even the metadata, but the space in my memory remained. I knew I'd taken it. I remembered the image, the smile, and the scratch on the skull's cheek that hadn't been there before. A new name was carved there now. Caroline. Caroline West. I hadn't heard that name in years. Not since she vanished in 7th grade. A quiet girl, soft-spoken, wore sleeves too long for her arms. She disappeared in October, just stopped showing up one day. Rumors swirled, transferred schools, family moved away, something darker. But I remembered the real story, the one that no one told. The last day anyone saw her, she'd been crying in the library, and I hadn't helped. I'd laughed. I'd said something I shouldn't have, something cruel, and now her name was carved into bone. I don't know why I went back. Maybe I needed to see if it was still there. Maybe part of me wanted to be punished. The storage room was unlocked this time. I didn't question it. The cabinet was open, and the skull was in the center of the table, waiting. The light in the room had changed dimmer, like something had been pulled across the windows. Dust hung thick, unmoving. I stepped forward, and the skull spoke again, this time with clarity, with rhythm. You laughed. You left. You forgot. Its jaw didn't move, but the voice echoed all around me, not through air, but through time. I sat across from it. The words weren't a threat. They were a statement. And I knew what was coming next, because I had dreamed of it. Every night, the sound of water, the hush of someone drowning alone. And now the skull spoke a final word, yours. I stood up and backed away from the table, but the skull didn't move. It didn't need to. The air around it pulsed with recognition, not warmth, not anger, just knowing. A presence that had nothing to prove because it had already won. I left the room without looking back. I told myself it was over, that I'd imagined it, that I'd been tired, stressed, unwell. I walked straight out of school, down the stairs, across the field, past the edge of the parking lot where the pavement buckled into crabgrass. The sky looked wrong, too still. When I got home, my mother asked if I was okay. I lied. That night, I checked my phone again. Nothing. But on my nightstand, where I always left my earbuds, was a small piece of bone, curved, polished, smooth as a tooth. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. I recognized the grain, the shallow carving down the middle, a letter H. The initial of the boy I fought with last spring, the one who slipped during gym, hit his head, was never quite the same after, the one who stopped speaking to anyone and then moved away, or so they said. I didn't sleep. The next morning I opened my locker. The skull was inside. No students saw it, no teachers, but it was there, nestled between my books, smiling wider now. Its sockets were filled with shadow, and its teeth were clenched around a slip of paper. I pulled it out, hands shaking. One word, one sentence, one command. Tell the truth. I dropped it. The skull didn't fall. It disappeared. Gone the moment it hit the edge of my vision. But the taste it left lingered, like dirt and rainwater and something deeper, like guilt. It wasn't haunting me. It was inhabiting me. And every time I blinked too slowly, I saw myself across the room, across the glass, already a skull, already speaking. I stopped talking after that. Not on purpose. It just became harder each day. Words felt thick, foreign, like my mouth had forgotten how to shape them. My thoughts came slow, sluggish, muffled, like trying to scream underwater. The world around me grew quieter too. People moved differently, slower, their faces less distinct, blurred around the edges like the focus in my eyes was slipping. But it wasn't vision that was failing. It was time. I'd walk into a room and forget how I got there. I'd read a page and forget the language. My own name started to sound wrong, like someone else's mouth had said it too many times. And always the skull returned. Never when others were watching, but in reflections, in windows, in puddles. I saw it over my shoulder, perched on the edge of a desk. In my dreams, it sat at the head of the classroom, tapping its jaw against the chalkboard like a metronome, counting down. Every time I saw it, a new word appeared inside my head. Clear, spoken without breath, always addressed to me. Confess, reveal, remember, then finally finish. One morning I woke to find writing on my ceiling. Not ink, not marker, scratched into the plaster with something sharp. A list of names, all the ones I'd forgotten. The ones who'd cried, the ones I'd ignored, the ones I'd hurt by doing nothing. Caroline West, Henry Alver, James Lynn, even Mr. Henson. I stared at them until the letters blurred, and then I saw the last name on the list, my own. The skull had stopped asking me to speak, because now it knew I wouldn't, not willingly, so it started speaking for me. I haven't spoken in days, maybe weeks. I don't know anymore. I sit in class and nod when expected. I smile when appropriate, but I don't speak, not with my voice. That part of me is fading, thinning out like a film exposed to too much light. The skull does it now. It speaks in ways no one notices. Sometimes I'll find a student crying in the bathroom, not knowing why. Sometimes a name will surface in casual conversation, a person no one else remembers, but everyone agrees existed. And sometimes I'll see someone staring blankly at the wall of the history room, fingers twitching in patterns that match the carvings on the skull. I know them all. I know who they used to be because I see it happen. They find it the skull, always in that same drawer or beneath the desk or tucked behind a cabinet that wasn't there the day before. They think it's a prank, a prop, a curiosity. Then it speaks, just one word, their name. And after that, they don't sleep the same. Their voice thins, their eyes forget how to close all the way. They stop remembering what day it is. They start hearing things that have never stopped being said. I try to warn them sometimes, but my voice doesn't reach far anymore. It echoes inside. I can still hear it faintly, like it's coming from the back of my throat, like bone tapping on bone. I know what the skull wants now. It's not revenge. It's not freedom. It's presence. It wants to be remembered, to be named, to be passed on. I didn't realize it at first, but that's what I've become. Not a victim, not a witness, just another mouth. And now that you've heard this, now that you've let its voice enter your thoughts, it knows you too. And when you close this story, when the lights dim and the silence stretches, you'll hear it, your name, softly, from the closet, or the drawer you forgot you opened, or the mouth you thought was still your own. And when it says it, don't answer, don't listen, don't look, because if you do, it will begin again. Even now, if you listen closely, you might hear it whisper your name, because some stories never end. They wait in quiet corners, behind locked doors, in the part of your mind you try not to visit. Maybe you've passed it already. Maybe it's been calling for you all along, because the scariest ghost stories are the ones we carry. If you crave more true ghost stories, subscribe to True Ghost Vault now. And whatever you do, don't look behind you.